So picking up right where we left off, we want to solve these three inequalities, and these are inequalities that need simplification. So let's begin by distributing. You have a 2 times, and on the inside you can't really do m take away 5. Those are not like terms, so you're going to have to distribute the multiplication. 2 times 3m, or technically 2 times negative 3m, that is negative 6m. And then 2 times a negative 5 is a negative 10. And of course, you're going to bring down the greater than or equal to, bring down the minus 28. Again, you only flip the inequality symbol on your last step if you're multiplying or dividing by a negative. So we're going to continue to solve for m. You don't want the negative 6 that's being multiplied in front of the m, and you don't want the minus 10. So of course, you get rid of the minus 10 first by doing the opposite of minus 10, which is plus 10. What you do to one side, do to the other. You're going to have negative 6m, that canceled out, is greater than or equal to negative 18. Again, this is saying negative 6 times m. So if you want to get rid of the multiplication of negative 6, you do the opposite of multiplying, which is dividing by negative 6. And when you do to one side, you do the other side. That will give you m is less than or equal to. Once again, if you multiply or divide by a negative on your last step, this is our last step. We did divide by negative on our last step. So you have to flip the inequality symbol. The greater than symbol becomes a less than or equal to, right? And negative 18 divided by negative 6 is a positive 3. So there's your answer. M is less than or equal to 3. If you wanted to graph that on a number line, put 3. That'd be a solid dot going to the left. Okay? Moving on. This one's extra fun because there's distributive property on both sides. So we are going to distribute negative 6 times w, that's negative 6w. Negative 6 times 1, that's negative 6. And then we're going to distribute the 2 times w, that's 2w. And the 2 times positive 5, that's a positive 10. So we have distributed. We still have that inequality symbol. The only time you change it is on your last step if you multiply or divide by a negative. So right here we have w's on both sides of the inequality. So I want to get w by itself on one side. So I would subtract 2w to get rid of this 2w. And when you do to one side, do to the other, subtract 2w. You will have a negative 6w take away a 2w. That is a negative 8w. Bring down the minus 6, bring down the less than, bring down the 10. There's your new inequality that only has w's on one side, okay? So now let's get that w by itself. How do you get rid of the minus 6? Well, you're going to do the opposite of minus 6, which is a plus 6. And what you do to one side, you do to the other, plus 6. Your new inequality reads 8w. Bring down the inequality is 16. For your final step, how do you get rid of that multiplication of negative 8 in front of the w? You do the opposite of multiplying, which is dividing by negative 8. When we do to one side, do to the other, divide by negative 8. That'll give you your final answer. W is negative 2 over here on this side, and it does flip. It does change. This less than symbol becomes a greater than symbol. Why? Because we divided by a negative on our last step. So there's our answer. W is greater than negative 2. If you wanted to graph it on a number line, put the negative 2 right there, put a greater number on the right side, which is negative 1. And you're thinking, wait a minute, is that really a greater number? Yes, it is, because you have to get to 0 before you get to the positive number. So anything on the right side is greater, anything on the left side is less, which means more negative. So a negative 3 over here. Anyway, because this does not have a solid line, this is not going to be a solid dot. It's going to be an open dot, and it is greater than, and greater than is to the right. Greater than is to the right. Again, it does not have a solid line, so I do not fill this in. It's an open dot. And greater than is to the right. It even looks like an arrow pointing to the right. Moving on. This is the last one, I believe. Let's distribute. 2 times q is 2q. 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. And of course, we're going to bring down the plus 6. And notice that there is no distributive property of combining like terms on the right side of this inequality. It's already simplified on the right side. I'm just going to bring down that less than. I'm going to bring down that minus 10. And again, all I've done is distribute the 2, giving us 2q minus 6. So after distributed property, you need to check and see if there's any combining like terms. So on the left side of this inequality, again, it's kind of like ignoring the right side for a bit. Simplifying, you distribute and then combine like terms. And right here you have a negative 6 plus 6. So what is negative 6 plus 6? That cancels out. So what you really have on the left side of the inequality is just 2q. And what do you have? You have this inequality, bring that down. And what do you have on the right side? A negative 10. So you really have a less than or equal to negative 10. How do you get rid of the 2 that's in front of the q that's really being multiplied, right? It says 2 times q. So how do you get rid of that multiplication of 2? You divide by 2. What you do to one side, do to the other side, divide by 2. Final answer will be q. And of course, 10 divided by negative 2 is negative 5. But the question is, do I change it or do I keep it? You're going to keep it. The only time that you change it is if on your last step you multiply or divide by a negative. This is not a negative. You're dividing by positive 2, so it stays. The only time it changes is if you multiply or divide by a negative. So right here, I'm going to draw a number line with the negative 5, negative 4, negative 6. This is going to be a solid dot because it has a solid line underneath it. Solid dot. And it is pointing to the left. It's pointing to the left. It's a less than symbol. Less than is to the left. Greater than is to the right. All right. I hope this helps. Let's now move on to these word problems that we have to create inequalities and then solve. So what I recommend is as you read it, start writing whatever you're reading. And just remember those tricky phrases like more than or less than. We already know that more means adding, but more than implies addition, but switching the order. So for more than the quotient, okay, so let's start with this. We know that more than is addition, but it requires a switch in order. So what are we adding? We're adding 4, and we're adding 4 with what? With the quotient of a number and 3. Okay, that's kind of tricky. Let's start with the more than. I want to put a plus sign. Now, than implies a switch. So instead of it saying 4 plus, it's going to say plus 4. So plus 4, okay? Now, how about what gets written over here on this side? It says the quotient. And I hope you remember that quotient means division or a fraction. And what is that fraction going to be? A number, which you're going to call x, and 3. So x on top and 3 on the bottom. So you're going to put a fraction. Okay, so right here, quotient is a fraction. And what is in that fraction? It's a number, which is x, and 3. So x over 3 plus 4. Whenever you see the word is, that means equal, but it says is at least. So we need to know that is at least actually means greater than or equal to. Now, some people are going to get confused with that. And of course, we have the number 9. So 9. There's your inequality right there that we created that we're going to have to solve, right? Now, again, if you're confused about is at least, think about that. Think of a real world situation. You must be at least 18 years of age to vote. Okay? What does that mean? At least 18. That means that in order to vote, you have to be 18 or greater. So your age would have to be greater than or equal to 18 with regards to voting, right? So at least actually means greater than or equal to. And that confuses some people because whenever they read least, they're thinking less, but that's not true. Is at least in a real world situation. Is at least is greater than or equal to. You have to be at least 18 years of age to vote. You have to be at least 16 years of age to have a license, so greater than or equal to. You have to be at least 21 years of age to drink, right, to buy alcohol, right? So at least is actually greater than or equal to. At most is the other way around, right? At most is actually less than or equal to. So, sorry about that, let me scratch that out. But at most would be less than or equal to. So if you want to join the army, the maximum age at most you could be is 33 or 33 years of age or 35, I'm not sure. But anyways, it's 35 or less, right? Anyway, let's go to some other questions here. 16. Once again, as you read it, I would start writing things down. What does sum mean? Sum means addition. So we're going to put addition, okay? And it does not imply a switch in order. So what are we adding? A number and 14, okay? The sum of a number, we're going to call that x, right? And 14, that's simply 14. So there it is, the sum of a number and 14. The sum of a number and 14 is less than. It doesn't say is at least or is at most. It's saying is less than, straight up, is less than or equal to what? To 3 times the number. Okay, so 3 times the number is simply 3 times the number. What number? That same number that we did over here, which was x. So you really have x plus 14 is less than or equal to 3x. And now we're going to solve this. And you want to get x by itself on one side, but the problem is you have x's on both sides. And you can move the x over here, or you can move this x over here. I think it's a little easier to move this x over here and then switch the whole thing. You'll see what I'm talking about in a couple of seconds. Let's begin by subtracting x. Subtracting x, we will have, let me write this in red, 14 less than or equal to 2x. So for my final step to get x by itself over here, I am going to divide both sides by 2, giving me 7 is less than or equal to x. Now, this is the answer. However, this answer is kind of written backwards because it says 7 is less than or equal to x, and you don't want to talk about 7, you want to talk about x, so you'd have to read this backwards or just take the whole thing and flip the whole thing over. Okay, this is correct. This is correct. So how about we put the x on the left side, the 7 on the right side, and if you know that this is correct, it was opening up to the x on this correct answer, so it has to continue to open up towards the x when you flip everything. So here's the correct answer. X is greater than or equal to 7, okay? Number 17, negative 3 times a number is increased by 7 is less than a negative 11. Dang, that's a mouthful. Okay, let's begin by writing down what we read. Negative 3 times a number, okay? So what is negative 3 times a number? That's simply negative 3 times x. So negative 3x is that term that they're talking about right here. Increased by, okay? So what does that mean? If I say your age increased by 1, you just say your age plus 1. So in this case, this increased by 7, that's simply going to be a plus 7, okay? So we have negative 3x increased by 7, plus 7. And then we have is less than. So that is a less than. Doesn't say less than or equal to, just says is less than negative 11. Negative 11. Okay, so there's your inequality. All you have to do is solve it now. How do you get rid of the plus 7? You're going to subtract 7. Subtract 7. That'll give you a new inequality that reads negative 3x, these canceled out, is less than negative 18. And that's really saying negative 3 times x is less than negative 18. So to get rid of that, you're going to divide by negative 3, divide by negative 3, cancels out x. Because you divided by a negative, you have to flip the inequality symbol, and it becomes 6. X is greater than 6. That's your final answer. Moving on. 5 times a number. So what does that mean, 5 times a number? That's simply 5x. Decreased by. So if I say your age decreased by 1, you're going to put your age minus 1. So decreased by means subtraction, right? Subtraction. And decreased by what? By 8. So you're going to say decreased by 8. Okay, and then it says is at most. That is the challenging one. Is, that means that we have to put an inequality here. At most. So what does that mean? Is at most. So again, is at most would be a less than or equal to. Less than or equal to. So think about it. Let's say you want to get on a kid's ride at the fair, and it says the height is at most 4 feet tall. You can't be taller than 4 feet to get on this little kid's ride. Okay, so that would be less than or equal to. Is at most is less than or equal to. is at least is greater than or equal to. And okay, so is at most what? 10 more than twice the number. Before I start writing, I already know that 10 is the number 10, right? But more than is addition, but it implies a switch. Okay, so if I say 1 more than your age, you're not going to say 1 plus your age, you're going to say your age plus 1. Anything with a more than or less than implies a switch in order. So you're not going to put 10 plus twice the number. Twice the number is 2x. So you're not going to put 10 plus 2x. You're actually going to put 2x plus 10. Once again, twice the number, that's simply 2x. That's a 2x. So instead of writing 10 plus 2x, we're going to put 2x plus 10 because more than implies a switch in order. So that will be 2x plus 10. There's your inequality that has variables on both sides. Let's solve this inequality. Again, you don't want x's on both sides, so let's get rid of one of them. I'm going to get rid of this 2x by subtracting 2x. And what I do to one side, I do to the other side, subtract 2x. I will now have 3x minus 8 is less than or equal to 10. And from there, I need to continue solving. I want to get rid of the minus 8 by doing the opposite, plus 8, plus 8. That'll cancel out. My new inequality will be 3x. That's what's left over on the left side of the inequality. It's still a less than or equal to, and 10 plus 8 is 18. So here's my final step. To get rid of the multiplication of 3, I need to do the opposite, which is divide by 3. And when you do to one side, do to the other, you will end up with x is less than or equal to 6. Notice I did not change the inequality symbol because I did not divide by a negative on my last step. So there's my answer. X is less than or equal to 6. Number 19, it says 7 more than 5/6 of a number is more than negative 3. Again, let's read a piece of it and write down what it represents. So we should understand that the words more than imply addition, but with a switch in order. So it's not going to be 7 plus, it's going to be something plus 7. So what is that something? It's over here. It says 5/6 of a number. Okay, and we already know that a number, that's just x. Okay, so we are going to be adding x, actually 5/6 of x, because 5/6 is a fraction. Again, 5/6 is a fraction of x, and we're going to be adding it to 7. Again, more than implies a switch in order. So if I said, what is 1 more than your age? You're not going to say 1 plus your age. You're going to put your age first and then plus 1. Even though that really doesn't make a difference when you're actually adding. More than, less than, the word than implies a switch in order. So we do have the more than, which is addition. And we're not going to put the 7 first. We're going to put the 7 second. And 5/6 of a number, that's the fraction 5/6 with x. We're going to write that first. 5/6 with x. And then we have the word is, which usually means equal, but right here it says is more than. So that's a greater than. Okay, is more than is greater than. Is less than, less than, right? And at the very end we have negative 3. So we have negative 3 over here. And here is our inequality. That's the tough part, reading it and writing the inequality. And now for the easy part, solving it. So you want to get x by itself on the left side of the inequality. You're going to get rid of the 7 first. I mean, there's many different roads to the same place, but I always like getting rid of that number that's all by itself. So the way to get rid of a plus 7 is to do a minus 7. And what you do to one side, you do to the other side. You're going to rewrite it. It's going to be a 5/6 x is greater than negative 10. Now, what is 5/6? It's a fraction, which really is a division problem. It's really saying 5 divided by 6. So to get rid of the division of 6, you're going to multiply by 6. And what you do to one side, do to the other side, multiply by 6. That will cancel it out. You will have 5x is greater than negative 60. And what is 5x really? That's really saying 5 times x. So the way to get rid of the multiplication of 5 in front of x is to do the opposite of multiplying, which is dividing. I'm going to divide by 5 and divide by 5. That will cancel out. You will now have x. You do not flip the inequality symbol because you did not divide by a negative on your last step. You divided by a positive 5. So you don't flip the inequality symbol. It stays the same. And a negative 60 divided by a positive 5, that is a negative 12. There's your answer. If you wanted to graph it on a number line, you put negative 12 right in the middle. Obviously, you got to get to the positives, so that's going to be a negative 11 and then negative 10. Going further left, that would be further less, which would mean negative. So negative 13 and negative 14 and so on and so on. So I am going to put an open dot at negative 12 because it does not have a solid line underneath it. If it had a solid line, it would be a solid dot, but it does not have a solid line, so it's not a solid dot, it's an open dot. And this is a greater than symbol, and greater than is to the right. Last question. 4 times, so we're going to have the number 4 multiplied by something, okay? So if it said 4 times x, we would write 4x, but it says 4 times what? Well, first of all, let's begin with 4 times. Okay, 4 times. Let's put 4 and then times. 4 times what? 4 times the sum of a number and 2. Okay, all right, so let's stop right there. What does the word sum mean? It means addition. And if I said, what's a sum of 2 and 3? Well, you would say 2 plus 3. So right here it says the sum of a number, which we know is x, and 2. So they want us to add x and 2. All right, so once again, reading that all together, 4 times what? The sum of x and 2. Okay, so if I want to add x and 2 before multiplying, I better have that in parentheses. That's the only way it's going to work. Because if I don't put parentheses, it's going to say 4 times x and then plus 2. And that's not what it says up here. It doesn't say 4 times x and then plus 2. It says 4 times the sum of what? Of x and 2. All right, it says increase by 3. What the heck does increase by 3 mean? It means that you're going to make it bigger by 3. Okay. And then it says is at least. That's a tricky part right there. Is at least. If you have to be at least 18 years of age to vote, that means greater than or equal to 18. So is at least is greater than or equal to. Okay, even though it sounds least means smaller, is at least actually means greater than or equal to. Okay, and then of course 27 at the very end. 27. So there's our complicated inequality. All we need to do now is solve it. So we're going to distribute 4 times x, that'll be a 4x. 4 times 2, that'll be an 8. Bring down the plus 3. Bring down the greater than or equal to and the 27. So we've distributed so far. After distributive property, you got to check and see if there's any combining like terms. And of course, we have this 3 and this 8. They're like terms. You could combine those. 8 plus 3 is 11. So you're going to have 4x plus 11 is greater than or equal to 27. And then to get x by itself on the left side of this inequality, you're going to get rid of this plus 7 first by subtracting 11. And subtracting 11, you will now have 4x is greater than or equal to 16, which really means 4 times x is greater than or equal to 16. To get rid of this multiplication of 4 in front of the x, you're going to do the opposite, divide by 4. Divide by 4. You're going to end up with x is greater than or equal to 4. If you wanted to graph that, you put 4 in the middle, a couple of values on each side of it, and this will be a solid dot at 4 because it has a solid line underneath. So I put an open dot, but it's going to be a solid dot because it has a solid line underneath it. So I need to fill that dot in, and greater than is to the right. All right, guys, a long video. I apologize. I hope this helped. We have the entire worksheet explained on these 2 videos that I did. These questions will be on the quiz on the next one that we have. Good luck.